In honor of Sayyedah Fatima Zahra, أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى أمك الصديقة الشهيدة المظلومة المقهورة فاطمة. يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. In honor of Fatima Zahra, أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. The members of Ahlul Bayt, peace be upon them, are great manifestations of Allah's mercy and generosity. In fact, they are the greatest manifestations of Allah's mercy and generosity. And part of that mercy and generosity is that the infallible teaches us lessons and morals through his actions in every segment of his life, regardless of the activity in which he indulges. So you find that the infallible, if he, for example, battles an enemy or upholds prayer, salat, or recites a dua, or simply eats and drinks, in any activity he indulges, the infallible teaches us what? Lessons, morals. That obviously take us back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that take us back to serving Allah Jalla Jalaluh, and also contribute in helping us reach our perfection, helping us actually becoming actual human beings. So the lives of the infallibles, peace be upon them, are filled with morals, filled with lessons. Thus, tonight, inshallah, and in the upcoming nights, we want to shed light on the marital life of Ali and Fatima, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhima. We want to shed light on that specific part of their blessed life because it contains a lot of lessons. Obviously, we won't be able to shed light on every single detail regarding their marital life. However, we want to shed light on certain lessons that we learn from these two giants, from these two infallibles, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhima, so that we may increase our understanding and our knowledge in regards to what is a good husband and what is a good wife. This is something that we're in desperate need of, especially today, for I believe we all know many couples, believing couples, go through marital problems. And sometimes the problems are so big they lead to divorce. The divorce rate in our era is quite high. And in order to solve these problems, one of the main solutions to these problems is understanding what is a good husband. Each husband, each believing man should understand what is a good husband. How does a good husband behave? What are his duties? What is expected of him? And also understanding what is a good wife. Every believing lady should understand what is a good wife, what is expected of her, what are her duties, what should she do. And the best way to understand all of these issues is analyzing the life, the marital life of the perfect husband and the perfect wife. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi and Sayyedatuna Fatimah al-Zahra salawatullahi alayhima. The narrations that speak about their marital life are numerous. We have numerous narrations, a lot of narrations that speak about their life. However, when we come and shed light on the beginning of their marriage, how the marriage starts, we learn a very important lesson, and that is when a mu'min wants to get married or a mu'mina wants to get married, it is essential that the individual finds his or her right match, the person who is suitable to that individual. For when we come to the marriage of Ali and Fatima alayhim salam, we find that a good amount of men sought Lady Fatima's hand in marriage. A good amount of men came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, and they asked the Prophet if they could marry the Lady of Light salawatullahi alayha. However, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi would refuse. And when he would tell Fatima alayha salam that so and so, for example, sought your hand in marriage, Zahra's facial expression would tell the Prophet that she did not want that man as her husband. They knew that the only match for Fatima al-Zahra was Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And the Prophet told some of his companions sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, that Lady Fatima's issue lies in the hands of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who will choose her husband. And Allah chose Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi alayhi. There's an interesting story that you can find in Dala'il al-Imama, the book called Dala'il al-Imama by Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari. Bear in mind, there were two scholars called Muhammad bin Jarir al-Tabari. One was the Sunni historian who wrote Tarikh al-Tabari and also has a tafsir book. And the second one is known as Muhammad bin Jarir al-Tabari Shi'i. He was a follower of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. In his book Dala'il al-Imama, which is a fabulous book containing fabulous traditions about Ali Muhammad salawatullahi alayhim, he mentions the following story. He says, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf and Uthman bin Affan one day came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Abdul Rahman told the Prophet, Ya Rasulallah, do you allow me to marry Fatima? if you do so, I will give her the following dowry. And he mentioned a massive dowry, which consisted of 100 she-camels and 10,000 dinars, meaning 10,000 golden coins. So he was offering the Prophet ﷺ an immense dowry, thinking that, if he offers the Prophet an immense dowry, the Prophet will accept. Uthman said the same. He told him, Ya Rasulullah, I'll give Fatima alayhi salam, if you marry me, Fatima, I will give her the same dowry, but Ya Rasulullah, I entered Islam before Abdurrahman ibn Auf. Meaning he was implying that you should accept me instead of him. Here the Prophet ﷺ got angry. And the tradition says he grabbed a bunch of pebbles, a handful of pebbles, and he threw them at Abdurrahman. Now you might ask why. Listen to the narration. He threw them at Abdurrahman, and the pebbles turned, with Allah's permission, into precious stones called durr. I believe you've heard of durr al-Najafi, for example, right? So the Prophet turned the pebbles into what? Into precious stones called durr. And he told Abdurrahman, are you trying to mesmerize me with your dowry? As in, I am Rasulullah. I can turn stones into gold, into diamond with Allah's permission. But we, Ahlul Bayt, are not seeking the pleasures of this world. We're seeking the bounties and blessings of Allah in the hereafter. I'm not looking for an expensive dowry. I want the right match for Fatima Zahra alayha salam. And the right match, the only match, was Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi afdalus salatu wassalam. Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi alayhi has a mesmerizing narration on this regard, which I believe many of you have heard. He says, Salamullahi alayhi, لولا أن أمير المؤمنين تزوجها لما كان لها كفء إلى يوم القيامة على وجه الأرض آدم فمن دونه. He says, if the commander of the faithful did not marry Fatima, Fatima would not have a match. There would be no man who is a suitable match to marry Fatima Zahra alayha salam. And he says, this applies to all humans who walked or walk on the face of the earth, from Adam alayhi salam to the last human being until the day of judgment. This hadith is quite mesmerizing because it indicates that Zahra al-Batul alayha salam is superior in level to the great prophets, excluding, of course, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. The Imam is telling you, suppose that Adam was not her ancestor and he wanted to marry Fatima, he would not be a suitable match. If Nuh, if Ibrahim, if Ismail alayhimus salam was not the ancestor of Fatima and he wanted to marry her, he would not be a suitable match. Only Ali was her match. Salawatullahi alayhima. So the first lesson we learn from the marriage of Ali and Fatima alayhim as-salam is the lesson of kafa'ah. When you want to get married, seek the right person. Seek your match. Ahlul Bayt tell us, salamullah alayhim, that when we are looking for marriage, it is essential that the following traits are found in your spouse, whether you're a male or a female. There are two traits that must be found in the person you want to marry. Number one, iman, faith. And number two, taqwa. Number two, taqwa, piety. The person should be a person who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Why should he be a person or she be a person who fears Allah Azza wa Jal? Aside from the fact that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam tell you that these two traits should be found in your spouse? Well, there are multiple reasons. One of which is the person who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not oppress his or her spouse. Even if problems arise, and it's normal for problems to arise between two individuals, between a husband and his wife, even if both of them follow Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, or believe in Ahl al-Bayt salamullah alayhim. It's normal for problems to arise. In fact, sometimes the problems become so big that these two believing individuals go through a divorce. It does not necessarily mean that they're bad. It does not necessarily mean that one of them is evil and he's going to hellfire. Take the example of Zainab bin Jahash and Zayd ibn al-Harith. They were married, correct? Before the Prophet ﷺ married Zainab bin Jahash, Zayd was her husband. Alright, he was her husband, but problems took place and they divorced, right? Who was bad? Who was evil? Was it Zayd or was it Zainab? Well, Zainab bin Jahash, according to our traditions, she was one of Rasulullah's good wives. So we say Rahmatullah alayha. Zayd ibn al-Harith, on the other hand, was the second martyr of Mu'tah. In the Battle of Mu'tah, Ja'far al-Tayyar alayhi salam was the essential commander of the Muslimin in Mu'tah. When he was martyred, Zayd ibn al-Haritha became the commander of the Muslimin. And this was due to Rasulullah's command, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. So he was the second martyr of what? Of Mu'tah. Which means both were good people. But subhanallah, problems took place and they ended up divorcing. I'm not encouraging people, of course, to divorce. No, that's not my point. My point is, if that happens, it does not necessarily mean that one of the two individuals is evil or he's going to hellfire. But even if that happens, if a person is taqi, if the male or the female has taqwa, has fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he or she will not oppress the other individual. He will not or she will not abuse him or her. Because they fear who? They fear Allah Azza wa Jal. Even if a husband gets to a point where he, let's say, detests his wife for some reason, if he fears Allah, he will not cross his limits, or in better terms, he won't cross Allah's limits, Jalla Jalaluh. Allah's lines. A second reason as to why a person should seek a pious spouse is that when a person is pious and faithful, naturally he goes back to who? He goes back to Allah. He goes back to Al-Thaqalain, Kitab Allah and Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam. He takes his knowledge from Kitab Allah, from the book of Allah and Ahl al-Bayt. He learns what he should do, how he should behave from the Quran and Ahlul Bayt salamullah alayhim. And it is beyond necessary. It is beyond necessary when a person gets married to speak with his or her spouse and to agree that when we go through disagreement, when we live a particular problem, we should seek a fair judge to judge between us. Who is more fair than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? As we said, it is normal for problems to arise. It is normal for two individuals to disagree. Ultimately, they're two different people, right? They're two different people. Each one has his own habits, has his own past. So it's normal for problems to happen. When problems take place, when a disagreement happens, it is essential to seek the fair judge so he can judge between them. As in, the judge will say, this person's right, that person's wrong. Who's more fair than Allah Jalla Jalaluh, the All-Just? So they should agree that if we go through disagreement, we will seek Al-Quran Al-Kareem and the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam to see who's right and who's wrong. And at that point, will submit to whatever the Quran and Ahlul Bayt say. If they actually submit, the problem will be obliterated. They'll solve the problem. They'll fix it. But one issue we might face is lack of submission. Sometimes we might know what Ahlul Bayt say. We might have it memorized by heart, but we're not willing to apply it. And I'm not pointing fingers here. I've told you once, possibly, and I'll say it again, the only person I accuse on the minbar is myself, no one else. But I remind my brothers and sisters of what I remind myself. This is also a lesson we learn from the two infallibles, Ali and Fatima, alayhim as-salam, who never disagreed. They never went through marital problems. Why? Is that even possible? Yes, because they're infallible, salamullahi alayhim. They're both members of ayat al-tathir. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. Allah only wishes, he says, Allah only wishes to push all impurities away from you, Ahlul Bayt, and to purify you thoroughly. Ali and Fatima are part of that verse. So both of them are pure and purified. When you have two individuals who are pure and purified, they will not disagree. They will not have marital problems. Salamullahi alayhima. Even then, one day Ali and Fatima went to Rasulullah, so he may judge between them. There's a lesson here. There's a lesson. They're teaching all Muslim men and all Muslim women, all Muslim husbands and wives to refer to the fair judge, the fairest judge, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When you refer to Rasulullah, you're referring to who? Allah Jalla Jalaluh. They went to Rasulullah and they asked him, Ya Rasulullah, tell us, what are our duties? As in, who is responsible of what? They used him as a judge. Again, to teach us a lesson. Salawatullahi alayhim. And so the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he said that Fatima's duty lies behind the door. As in, it is her duty to uphold the house chores, to take care of the house chores. And Ali's duty lies outside the door, meaning it's his duty to bring sustenance, provisions, water, food, and the likes to the family. This narration, by the way, is very important. And inshallah, we will shed light on it in the upcoming nights. But tonight, the only point that I want to focus on is that they went to Rasulullah and they made him the qadi. Qadi means what? The judge. They made him the judge. So when a believing man gets married to a believing woman, it is important from day one to agree. If we disagree one day, we'll refer to who? Al-Quran al-Kareem. And Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, so that the thaqalan can put an end to our disagreement. The marriage of Ali and Fatima, salamullahi alayhima, as we said, was a blessed marriage that contained many lessons. And one of the main lessons was il-kafa'ah. Make sure that when you get married, you marry your match, a person who is suitable to you, a person who is faithful and fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, how about the second salawat? A third loud salawat. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi manifested this lesson in the clearest of manners when he rejected each individual who sought Lady Fatima's hand, except for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Allah Ta'ala commanded him to marry An-Nur, the light, to An-Nur, to the light. And so Amir al-Mu'mineen came, seeking Lady Fatima's hand in marriage, salawatullah alayhima, and obviously Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa was thrilled. He was extremely happy. At that point, the Prophet asked Imam Ali alayhi salam. He told him, "What will you give me, Ya Ali?" Meaning, what will you give Fatima as a dowry? The Imam alayhi salam told him, "Ya Rasulullah, I only possess 3 things: my horse, my camel, and my armor." In a second tradition, he also includes the sword. He says, "I have a sword." So the Prophet tells him, "As for your horse, you will need it to battle in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as for your camel, you will need it to transport your family from place to place. However, we'll accept the armor. Allah has married Fatima to you, has married you to Fatima, salamullahi alayhima, and the dowry for that marriage will be the armor." Then Rasulullah told him, sallallahu alayhi wa, "Go and sell it." The commander went to the market. He sold the armor. According to some traditions, he sold it for 500 silver coins. Many people ask, what was the dowry of Sayyedah Fatima? This was the dowry. 500 dirhams, which equate today, based on the modern value of silver, approximately $1,000, give or take. That's it. That was the whole mahr, the whole dowry of who? The Queen of the Universe, Fatima Zahra alayha salatu wassalam. That was her dowry. And we're told in our narrations explicitly. Review, for example, Wasa'il al-Shia for Al-Hurr al-Amili. Explicit narrations telling us, do not exceed the dowry of Fatima Zahra alayha salam. Let not your dowries exceed hers. Salamullahi alayha. Every mu'mina is a great human being, right or wrong. Every mu'mina is valuable, but she is not as great as the Lady of Light, not as valuable as Fatima Zahra. Zahra's dowry was a cheap dowry. That's what the tradition says. It was cheap. Why? Because Rasulullah wants to teach us a lesson, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. The dowry is not the most important part in the marriage. It's a secondary issue. The monetary issues in marriage are secondary issues. The most important issue in marriage is kafa'ah, finding the right wife for your son and the right husband for your daughter. That's the main point. Thus, Rasulullah told the Imam, go and sell the armor. The Imam went, he sold it for 500 silver coins. According to another tradition, it says 400 silver coins. Nonetheless, the Imam came back with the silver coins. And he poured the silver coins on Rasulullah's lap. But he says the following word. He says, Rasulullah did not ask me how many silver coins were there. And I did not inform him. Is there a lesson here? Yes. There's a lesson. There's a lesson in every single act committed by the infallible. Rasulullah is telling us, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, don't be extremely picky with the dowry of your daughter. It's a secondary issue. Obviously, he should give her a dowry, but don't be extremely picky over that issue. Unfortunately, sometimes problems take place because of the dowry. And sometimes the whole marriage of two believers is cancelled. Why? Simply because the families disagreed over the dowry. When Ahlul Bayt have already told us, let not your dowry exceed The dowry of Fatima al-Zahra alayha salatu wasalam. So what is there to fight about? What is there to disagree about? The Prophet did not ask him, how many silver coins are there, Ya Ali? He did not ask him. And the Imam did not inform him. The Prophet at that point, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, grabbed a bunch of silver coins with one of his hands, and he summoned Bilal. Bilal, come forth, take these silver coins and buy perfume for Sayyedah Zahra alayha salam. Then he took another amount of silver coins with both of his hands, and he summoned none other than Abu Bakr bin Abi Quhafa. And he told him, take these and buy furniture and clothing for Fatima salamullahi alayha. So we understand that part of the dowry was used to buy the furniture of Ali and Fatima's house salamullahi alayhima. And in that lies also an important lesson. Abu Bakr left. The Prophet sent also Ammar bin Yasir rahmatullah alayh and a bunch of companions to bring the accessories and the furniture of Ali and Fatima's house salamullahi alayhima. When you analyze, my brothers and sisters, the narration of Ali and Fatima's marriage, you realize that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi simplified. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi simplified marriage. He demonstrated important, vital lessons regarding the simplicity of marriage through the marriage of Ali and Fatima. And indeed, this was one of his big accomplishments. One of the big accomplishments of the Prophet ﷺ is that he simplified zawaj. Because zawaj, marriage, should be easy, should not be complicated, should not be difficult. So I should marry my daughter to any random man? No, you shouldn't. Marry her to the right match. But don't focus too much on secondary issues. Focus on the primary issue. The other issues are easy. The Prophet ﷺ simplified marriage to the point traditions tell us sometimes, imagine this, a Muslim man would come to the mosque of Rasulullah to pray, for example, or to do dua, to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. And that Muslim man would be single. When he would leave the mosque, he would be married. Who would marry him? The Prophet would marry him to a Muslim lady. He wouldn't expect to be married. He'd come for prayer, for example, but by the time he leaves, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have performed the nikah ceremony. Subhanallah. And that's what we need today. We need to simplify marriage. Why? Well, look around you. Look at our circumstances. I'm going to ask you a question. How easy is it today to fall into sin? How easy is it, especially for the youth, to fall into a sin pertaining to carnal desire? It's super easy, right? Let's ask a second question. How easy is it to get married? It's not too easy. Maybe not super hard, but it has its challenges when it should be the other way around. Sahih? It should be difficult to perform haram, easy to perform halal. It should be difficult to fall into sin, and it should be easy to get married. If we want to serve our communities, and we want to serve our youth, to serve the upcoming generations, we need to work collectively, of course. We need to work collectively on this issue. Simplify marriage just as your Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi simplified it. The marriage of Ali and Fatima was beyond blessed, but it was simple. Their wedding was beyond blessed, but it was a very simple wedding. Subhanallah. Near the end of that wedding, before Amir al-Mu'mineen enters his house with his beloved wife, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa places the hand of Ali, the hand of Fatima, in the hand of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And you could imagine how much joy those three infallibles were experiencing on that day. It was a day of joy for Ahlul Bayt. Truly a day of joy. Zahra on that day was surrounded by Banu Hashim. Hamza was present, alayhi salam. And they had unsheathed their swords as they surrounded Fatima al-Zahra, salamullahi alayha. If only those swords were around when al-Zahra was attacked after Rasulullah's death, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. It was a day of joy. And I could imagine Khadija alayhi salam rejoicing from heaven as she witnesses her beloved daughter Fatima and her beloved Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah alayhim. On that day, Rasulullah put the hand of Fatima in the hand of Ali, which reminds me of another day in which he did the same. He also placed the hand of Fatima in the hand of Ali. But that day was a day of pain, a day of sadness, a day of crying. Why? It was one of Rasulullah's last days, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. He was poisoned, and he was on the brink of shahada, on the brink of martyrdom. Ali, Fatima, Hassan, Hussein alayhim salam surrounded the Prophet, and the Prophet began crying. He wanted to speak with them, but he began crying. He began sobbing. So Ahlul Bayt also began crying with their beloved Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. At a certain point, Rasulullah grabbed the hand of Fatima and he placed it in the hand of Ali. And he addressed Ali saying, he told him, Ya Abul Hasan, هذه وديعة الله ووديعة رسوله. O Abul Hasan, this is the trust of Allah and the trust of Muhammad, his messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. عندك, I place it in your hands. فاحفظ الله واحفظني فيها. So protect her, O Ali. Protect her. Uphold Allah's commands and my commands in regards to her protection. وَإِنَّكَ لَفَاعِلُهُ. And indeed you will protect her. You will preserve Fatima alayha salam. Then the Prophet kept on talking until he foretold the tragedies that would befall the Lady of Light. Listen to his words carefully. Rasulullah is talking sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Sayyid ibn Tawus rahimahullah mentions this narration in one of his books. Rasulullah tells Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, waylun liman zalamaha. O Ali, woe unto he who shall oppress her. Ya Ali, waylun liman zalamaha. وويل لمن ابتزها حقها. Woe unto the one who will snatch away her right. وويل لمن هتك حرمتها. Woe unto he who will violate her sanctity. Then he says, woe unto he who will burn her door. Aywa Zahra. Woe unto ye who will hurt her husband and friend, meaning alayhi salamullah alayh. Woe unto he who will oppose her and fight her. Then he recites dua. He says, Allahumma inni minhum bari' وهم مني براء. Oh Allah, I am disassociated from them, and they are disassociated from me. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa names those enemies of Fatima alayha salam. He mentions them by name. I say, Ya Rasulallah, forgive me for these words. Ya Rasulallah, everything you foretold took place. It had only been hours or days after your martyrdom when the enemies came to the house of Ali and Fatima salamullahi alayhima. Hundreds, if not thousands of armed men were outside the house awaiting Amir al-Mu'mineen. In case Ali ibn Abi Talib unsheathes his sword, they are ready to fight him. Ajarakumullah. The enemy came to the house of Fatima alayhi salam. The second caliph told his companions to hold logs of wood with them, to bring logs of wood to the house of Ali and Fatima. Allahu Akbar. Is this how you console the daughter of Rasulullah? Fatima had just lost her father. Is this how you console her? Instead of bringing her flowers and saying Azzam Allah laka al-ajr ya Fatima, they bring logs of wood. Meanwhile, Fatima alayha salam is sitting behind her door, grieving over Rasulullah. Her head is wrapped with a cloth. All of a sudden, Fatima hears the man calling, "Oh, you shall come out and pledge allegiance to the Caliph of Rasulullah, or else I will set your house ablaze." Ajarakumullah. Zahra al-Batul knew this is the time for me to rise, and so she rose and stood behind the door, not to open the door, rather to tell them, "Leave us alone. I do not give you permission to enter my house." Ajarakallah ya baqiyatullah. Fatima alayhi salam said, "What business do you have with us? Will you not leave us alone?" The man told her, "Open the door, or else I will set your house ablaze." Zahra alayhi salam said, "Will you not fear Allah? Will you enter my house without permission?" When the man saw that Fatima alayhi salam is not opening the door, he told the enemies, he set the door of Fatima alayhi salam on fire. Aywa musibata. Meaning he set part of the door on fire. Then he tried to open the door. Fatima alayhi salam placed her hands on the door. When he saw that it is not opening, he retreated. Ajarakallah ya baqiyatullah. Then he kicked the door open. Aywa Zahra. Fatima called her father Rasulullah. What happened at that point? The enemy says, he says, when this happened, she faced me, and the light of her face blinded my eyes. So what did you do? He says, hence I slapped her from over the veil. I slapped her from over the veil so hard that her earring broke. and fell on the ground. أيوا فاطمة وسيدة وجاوزوا الحد بلطم الخد. The poet says they crossed their limits when they slapped that cheek. شلت يد الطغيان والتعدي. May the hand of transgression be paralyzed. Ajarakumullah. Sulaim says he then grabbed his sword as it was in his scabbard, and he struck the side of Lady Fatima. He took his whip and lashed her on her forearm. Meanwhile, Zahra was calling her father, Ajarakumullah, and he cornered Fatima az-Zahra. Fatima was between the wall and the door. Then he crushed the Lady of Light. Aywa Fatima wa Zahra. As a result, her rib broke and a nail pierced through her chest. The poet says وما درى المسمار حين أصابها وما درى المسمار حين أصابها من قبلها قلب النبي أصاب. Didn't the nail know that before it pierced through the body of Fatima, it was piercing through the heart of Muhammad? Who will Fatima call? Will she call Amir al-Mu'mineen? She knows Amir al-Mu'mineen has a will that he cannot violate. If she calls him, she will only break his heart. And so Fatima calls Rasulullah, saying, "Oh Father, oh Rasulullah, is this how your beloved daughter used to be treated?" Then she calls Fidda, "Oh Fidda, Fidda, come to my aid, come to me, oh Fidda, take me, for the fetus that lies inside of me has been killed." At that point, Amir al-Mu'mineen made an appearance. What did Ali do, salamullahi alayhi, to the enemy? Sulaim says he came to him, he grabbed him by the collar and slammed him to the ground. He jabbed his neck and nose and was about to kill him, but he remembered the will of Rasulullah, and so he said, "I swear by He who cherished Muhammad with prophethood, O son of Sahaq, had it not been for an obligation from Allah and the will of Rasulullah, you would have known that you cannot enter my house." Ajarakumullah. At that point, the man began calling for help, and so the ruthless men entered the house of purity. They entered the house of Ali and Fatima. Amir al-Mu'mineen rushed to his sword, but they beat him to it. They surrounded him, outnumbered the Imam, and placed a rope around the neck of Ali salawatullah alayh. Then they began dragging Amir al-Mu'mineen to their caliph. Ali was chained made by the will of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. However, it seems Amir al-Mu'mineen wished at that point if only two people were present with him. Who were these people? Amir al-Mu'mineen was looking right and left, and he was calling out, wa Hamzata wala Hamzata li al-yawm. Oh Hamza! Oh Hamza! Hamza is not with me today. Wa Ja'fara wala Ja'fara li al-yawm. Oh Ja'far! Ja'far is not with me today. Ajarakumullah. Fatima alayha salam was in incredible pain, but when she realized that the enemy is about to take Ali, they're about to bring him outside her house, the tradition says Fatima rose and she stood in front of the door. It's as if she's telling them, you cannot take Ali so long that Fatima is alive. Ajarakumullah. And so Qunfud came to the Lady of Light and lashed her with his whip and pushed her on her door such that one of her ribs broke. Aywa Zahra, how much pain can that fragile body withstand? أجرك الله يا صاحب الزمان. Yes, it is dear upon the believer to hear that based on the traditions of Ahl al-Bayt, it seems multiple men attacked the Lady of Light on that day. Hence Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam addresses Mughira ibn Shu'bah years after that incident. I am sorry for the following narration. What does the Imam tell him? He says, Mughira, as for you, you are the one who kept on beating the daughter of Rasulullah until you made her bleed. And you caused the miscarriage of her fetus. أيوة مصيبتها وفاطمة. Fidda came to the Lady of Light. She took her to her chamber, and over there is Zahra al-Batul miscarried Muhsin. أيوة محسنة. And she fell unconscious. Now imagine the scene. Amir al-Mu'mineen is being dragged to the Caliph. Zahra is lying unconscious on the dust. Muhsin has been killed. My heart breaks for Hassan, Hussein, Zainab and Kulthum. Where should they go? Should they remain with their mother Fatima, or should they run after their father Ali? وأهل بيت محمد يا رسول الله. It is dear upon you to witness all of these calamities. All of this happened hours or days after your martyrdom, Ya Rasulullah. Hence the poet says, as if Fatima addresses her father, I will conclude the majlis with these lines of poetry. She tells him, Father, Father, when you left this world, calamities upon calamities befell us. Father, the son of Sahak and his devils came to my house. They were carrying logs of wood with them. So what did you tell them, O Lady of Light? يا نشتش عندك جاي لينا. I told him, why have you come to our house? كل يوم قلبي ملوعينا. Why is it that every day you come and hurt me? You come and you hurt me with your presence and words. وحدنا بعزانا دخل لنا. Leave us alone. Let us mourn our beloved Muhammad in peace. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. أبويا بس ما شافني وزرق عينا. Father, as soon as he realized that I was behind the door, عصرني ومني استفدنا. He crushed me with my door and exacted his grudge on me. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك بأحب الخلق إليك محمد وعلي وفاطمة والحسن والحسين والتسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. فرج عنا يا الله. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج، سهل له المخرج، أوسع له المنهج. اجعلنا من جنوده وأنصاره وأعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم ارحمنا رحمة لا تعذبنا بعدها أبدا، واغفر لنا ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. اللهم اقض حوائجنا. If anyone has a need, ask it and Allah Ta'ala will answer you. اللهم بحق المضطرة بين الحائط والباب مولاتنا الزهراء عليه السلام، اقضي حاجة كل محتاج، لا سيما حوائج الحاضرين والمشاهدين ومن سألني الدعاء يا رب العالمين. اللهم اشف وعافي جميع المرضى بحق مريض كربلاء زين العابدين عليه السلام، وارحم أمواتنا وأموات المؤمنين والمؤمنات، لا سيما المنسين الذين لا يذكرهم ذاكر، والشهداء العظام والعلماء الكرام، إلى أرواحهم جميعا وإلى أرواح أمواتكم وأمواتي، لا سيما إلى أرواح والداي وأخي وحبيبي حسين. نبعث ثواب مجلسنا هذا وثواب الفاتحة تسبقها صلاة على محمد وآل محمد.